Hey, I wanted to bring a little closure to our read aloud that we've worked on for a long time this year. You remember we were reading The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, and just before school had to close, we got to such a good part. We know that the robot has lived on the island, and his baby bird, Brightbill, came back. And just when that happened, the Ricos arrived. And we assumed that the Ricos were other robots from where he was created and or where she was created. Remember, it's a she. I always got that mixed up. Anyway, Raz is trying to defend herself against the Ricos, and she kills Rico 3. They disable the whole island of animals, stick up for Raz, and help defeat Rico 2. And then Rico 1 ends up pushing the off button of Raz, and that's where I left you. So we don't know what happens to Raz. And I know many of you want to so bad read The Wild Robot Escapes, so we've got to know how The Wild Robot ends before we can go to book 2. So we were on chapter 75, The Last Rifle. I'm going to read 75 through 80 because that is what actually where the book ends, is at chapter 80. Okay, so here we go. With the targeted deactivate, Rico 1 calmly moved on to the next phase of his mission. He limped through the grave site and began collecting every single robot part. He splashed into the shallows and returned with a foot. He shook the sand from the cracked torso. He pulled a head out of the tide pool. Each part was then piled around Raz's lifeless body. Brightbill watched in horror as his mother slowly disappeared under a pile of parts. Raz looked just like the dead robots, but she wasn't dead. She had simply been shut down. Don't do it, Brightbill. The flock tried to stop their leader. It's too dangerous. But the goose was determined to bring his poor mother back to life. Brightbill crouched low to the ground and slowly moved toward the pile of robots. And when Rico 1 limped away to collect another part, Brightbill sprinted over the rocks, pushed past arms and legs, and squeezed into the pile. Click! A muffled voice echoed across the shore. Hello, I am Razum, Unit 17134. But you may call me Raz. Brightbill hugged his mother's face as her computer brain rebooted. Mama, wake up! What happened? She said finally. Where is the Rico? He's coming this way. What were you thinking, Brightbill? You must leave now before he kills us both. I was scared, Mama, cried the goose. I didn't know what to do. Heavy footsteps stomped toward them. Robot parts were knocked aside, and then Rico 1 looked down with his glowing eyes. Brightbill turned to squirm away, but thick fingers locked him like a cage. Mama, help! Cried Brightbill as he was pulled up from the pile. Please do not hurt my son, begged Raz. He is harmless. Rico 1 paid no attention to Raz. He was held up by Goose in the giant hand, ready to crush the life out of him. Mist swirled in the breeze. Waves slashed against the rocks. Seagulls circled above. No, not seagulls, vultures. And one of them clutched something silver in his talons. The vulture spiraled down, and Rico 3's rifle clattered onto the shore. Geese and otters quickly surrounded the rifle. They squawked and squeaked and fumbled with the weapon, trying to aim the clunky thing. The hunter was confused. How had those animals gotten a rifle? And could they possibly know how to fire it? They did know. The geese had seen a trigger press before, A beam of light briefly flashed through the gloom. At first, it seemed as if nothing had happened, but a moment later, Rico One's chest began glowing a bright, brilliant orange. And then it was melting and oozing down his front. And soon there was a wide, gaping hole in the middle of his torso. His hand suddenly unclenched, and Brightbill fluttered away. Seawater sprayed over the grave site. So there's the picture of it. There's Raz. Oop, I'm looking over here. There's Raz. Seawater sprayed over the grave site, and steam hissed up from the Rico's scorching hot guts. He shook and twisted and collapsed beside Raz. Rico One turned his face to Raz and spoke in a quiet, garbled voice. More Ricos will come for you, and if you destroy them, still more will come. The makers will not rest until all missing robots have been retrieved. When will they come? Said Raz. How long do we have? You can still be fixed, Raz. Go to the airship. Bring all the robot parts with you. The ship knows what to do. His voice went silent. His eyes went dark. Rico One was dead. So he's supposed to go to this ship. He's supposed to be fixed. And if he doesn't, then he's going to be overtaken by other Ricos. But on the other hand, Brightbill, what about Brightbill? He's got to leave his baby that he's taking care of. So chapter 76 is called The Broken Robot. Geese and otters were busting all around Raz. They were pulling arms and legs out from the robot pile and pressing them against her body. They were hoping to hear thrip sounds, and the robot limbs would snap right into place, and Raz would return to her old self, and life on the island would go back to normal. But nothing happened. No matter what they did, the limbs wouldn't attach. Our robot's body was too badly damaged. I'm sorry, Ma, said Brightbill, his voice trembling. I thought it would work. It's okay, son, said Raz calmly. I am lucky I still think and speak. The animals tried to smile at their poor friend, but they couldn't hide their sadness. Raz was a mangled wreck, and there was nothing they could do to fix her. The robot wanted to be strong for her son and her friends. She wanted to ease their worried minds and tell them everything would be fine. But Raz knew that everything would not be fine. She looked down at her broken body, and then she looked up at the geese and the otters and said, I will need some help getting home. So chapter 77 is called The Meeting. Strong, nimble creatures carried Raz up the sea cliffs and across the island. They carefully propped her up inside the nest. They built a fire, and then they left the robot with her son. Raz and Brightbill sat there, staring at the flames until the goose finally said, Do you need anything, Ma? I could really use some new arms and legs. The robot chuckled at her own joke. That isn't funny, cried the goose. My mother is broken and I don't know what to do about it. I am sorry for joking. Raz adjusted her voice to a more serious tone. I know you want to fix me, but there is nothing anyone here can do. At these words, her son looked away. Brightbill, I am afraid we have some difficult decisions to make. I think you should arrange a meeting of our closest friends. We could use their advice." The goose disappeared out the door, and soon Roz's oldest and wisest friends were on their way. Ludwig was the first to arise. She limped into the lodge on her injured foot and sat close to her robot friend. Mr. Beaver appeared next, followed by Fink and Swooper, and then Tawny curled up on the floor. Mother Bear was too badly hurt to make the journey, so Nettle came to her place. She sat in the garden with an enormous head jutting through the doorway. Bright Bill returned with Chit Chat, who was nursing her burned tail. The last one to crawl in was Craig, the old turtle. Once everyone was there, the meeting began. The group talked all through the night. They discussed the Ricos. They discussed what to do about Roz. They discussed how to keep the island safe. There were stark differences of opinion, and tempers flared. But by daybreak, the group had agreed to a plan of action. That morning, the dawn truce didn't take place in the great meadow. Instead, it took place in a small meadow by the foot of the mountain, in front of the airship. Weary animals quietly hobbled into the clearing. The only sounds came from the gurgling brook that wound around the gatherings and right past our robot. Roz sat in the wet grass, and she leaned against a rock. She looked so sad and frail. However, she still had her thoughts and her words, and for a moment, that was all she needed. "Good morning, animals of the island." Roz's voice filled the meadow. "I must look strange to you, all beaten up like this, but I hope I still sound like your old friend." Hundreds of heads nodded. "You fought bravely yesterday. You risked your lives defending me, and I am eternally grateful. But many of our friends were wounded. Some may never recover, and there is worse news. Before the last Rico died, he told me that more of his kind will come to our island. They might already be on the move, and even if we defeat them, still more will come. My makers will not rest until all their property has retrieved. They want the dead robots. They want the broken parts. They want me." The crowd was silent. "But I care about this island far too much to put any of our lives in more danger. And so, my friends, I must leave." Voices cried out, "Don't go, Roz. Next time we'll be prepared. We risked our lives so you could stay." "I hear you." The robot's voice cut through the din. "But look at me. My body is ruined." And the Rico said, "The only ones who can help me are my makers." "What if he lied?" howled a voice. "You can't trust these monsters." "You are right," said Roz. "He might have been lying. There may be no hope for me, but that is a chance I have to take. Animals, you are taught to be wild. I want to be wild again, and so I must try to get the repairs I need. It is for the good of me and the island that I return to my makers." A calm settled over the crowd. They knew Roz was right. Chapter 78. The Farewell. Our robot had an army of animals at her command, and she asked them to bring every robot part and rifle back to the airship. Absolutely everything had to go. It was the only way to be sure that the Ricos would never come back. The island animals had no trouble locating the remains of the dead robots. Retrieving those remains took a bit more effort, but they were up to the challenge. Teams of clever creatures returned with robot parts of different shapes and sizes. Smashed heads and broken rifles and twisted tubes and heavy bodies were all loaded into the ship until the entire island had been cleared. Even the tiniest scraps were collected. It's amazing what an army of animals can do. A light mist was falling when they finally heaved Roz through the ship's doorway. Her head slowly turned around to face the crowd of geese and beavers and owls and insects and foxes and raccoons and vultures and moose and bears and possums and fish and deer and otters and turtles and woodpeckers and squirrels and frogs and hares and on and on. Every animal on the island had come to give the robot a proper send-off. "Goodbye, you wild animals," Roz's voice echoed through the gray mist. The wild animals smiled, and then a few of them started to roar. The more started to screech, and then more started howling and chirping and grunting. Soon every creature was hollering goodbye to Roz. The chorus of wild voices grew louder and louder, shaking the robot's body, rattling the ship, booming across the island and up to the clouds, and then their voices gradually died down in silence. Brightbill fluttered up to his mother's shoulder. "You understand why I must leave?" said the robot. "I understand," sniffled the goose. "More Ricos could be headed here right now. I just do not know. There is so much I do not know. I think it is time I get some answers." "Will I ever see you again, Mama?" said Brightbill, wiping his eyes. "You are my son, and this is my home," said Roz. "I will do everything in my power to return." Brightbill hugged his mother's worn face. "I love you, Mama." "I love you, son." The goose fluttered back to his flock. The robot took one last look at her home, and the door closed. The Departure, Chapter 79. The airship engines automatically fired up. Then the ship slowly floated above the island, turned to the south, and disappeared into the clouds. Chapter 80. The Sky. Our story ends in the sky, where the robot was being whisked away from the only home she had ever known. As Roz sat up in the airship, broken and alone, and speeding toward a mysterious future, she looked back at her miraculous past. Reader, it must be impossible that our robot could have changed so much. Maybe the Ricos were right. Maybe Roz really was defective. Or some glitch in her programming had caused her to accidentally become the wild robot. Or maybe Roz was designed to think and learn and change. She had simply done those things better than anyone could have imagined. However it happened, Roz felt lucky to have lived such an amazing life, and every moment had been recorded in her computer brain. Even the earliest memories were perfectly clear. She could see the sun shining through the gash in her crate. She could still hear the waves crashing against the shore. She could still smell the salt water in the pine trees. And when would she ever hear or smell those things again? Would she ever climb a mountain or build a lodge or play with the goose? Not just a goose, her son. Brightbill had been Roz's son from the moment she picked up his little egg. She had saved him from a certain death, and then Brightbill saved her. He was the reason Roz had lived so well for so long, and if she wanted to continue living, if she wanted to be wild again, she needed to be with her family and friends on her island. So as Roz raced through the sky, she began computing a plan. She would get the repairs she needed, she would escape from her new life, and she would find her way back home. Now, I want to encourage you to read book 2, because book 2 is even better than book 1. So if you can get your hands on The Wild Robot Escapes, it's worth it. You will see that Roz ends up in a different place, and she has to figure out how to find her precious son Brightbill. If you read it, let me know, because it's amazing and worth it. Hope you enjoyed it.